Welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. As you know, what we want to make sure to do is show things the way they really are. Well, right here with me is one of our strong activists here in Houston, Verg Parks. How are you doing today, my friend?
Hi, I'm feeling pretty good, comparatively speaking. Yeah,
Well, you know what?
yeah, I feel like I've
Let
survived something.
you know why? Because you did. Let's get a start here, folks. For a long time, people have been talking about COVID-19 as if it was just something simple. It affects people in many different ways. But what hurts the most is when people make light of it and put many of our fellow citizens at risk. Well, here is somebody who's been active in the community, somebody who has always been a stalwart, a strong person. And you know what? COVID-19 taught her something.
Yeah.
Virginia, tell me a little bit about yourself, first of all. Just a little bit. Let people know that you're
Uh,
just one of us.
Former obsessive HIV treatment activist, which played a huge role in my um, how I handled COVID.
Hmm.
But I was very blessed, and so used to be an HIV treatment activist. Actually, have met Tony Fauci.
Hmm.
It's not like we're Facebook buds, but and then moved home. Yeah, I lived in San Francisco for many years. Moved back to Houston to help take care of my mom in 2002. Um, anyway, and lived in Philly for a while. I've pretty much been a social justice activist as long as I can remember. I realized a few years ago I used to think that my mom and dad went to lots of picnics and parades with Black people. And they took us with them, and so I never really thought anything of it. I was like, yeah, we just, there's always good food, right? And I was like 4, I think. And a few years ago, my brother said, Doofus, those were rallies and marches that they were taking us to. And so, yeah, so I think
You were an
so. My
activist
parents,
from before you knew you were
yeah,
an
yeah.
activist.
My parents were union organizers. They were involved. Not they weren't like leaders, but they were definitely involved in the civil rights movement, campaigned for Barbara Jordan, um, and so it's kind of in my blood. And so when the AIDS epidemic hit, I knew I had to do more than I was able to do here in Texas. So I did. I went to San Francisco on vacation, went to one ACT UP Golden Gate meeting, um, and the die was cast.
And
And
then you
so
became
I,
forever an activist. No
oh
matter
yeah,
what
and
kind of
then
job you
yeah,
had, you was an
yeah,
activist. You were
yeah.
an activist.
So yeah, pretty much,
Well,
yeah.
look, let me tell you something, Virginia. First of all, I want to thank you for something, right? A lot of people, when they get sick, they get some sort of illness, they kind of run in a hole and they act as if it's a shame or they don't let anybody know what's
Yeah.
going on. And I have a completely different feel for that, right? I have a wife who has lupus and we've always spoken out about it. My daughter recently
Hmm.
got a stroke and we've always spoke about it. And one of the reasons I do that is because too many people, I believe, suffer in silence. So what I like with social media, the part of social media that I like, is it gives people who want to be honest an opportunity to come out there and tell their stories so that other people, even if they're in their home alone, they don't feel alone. They know that other people are going
Yeah.
through the same kinds of things. So when I started to read your story, you were chronologically going through your COVID experience. And all I could think about is, wow, that is really good. So why don't you tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about it?
Well, and I felt that that was important, and it was actually very intentional. I think I had a comment in one of them, because I had the experience as an AIDS activist of having friends that I would. We didn't have social media and even cell phones then,
Hmm.
but I had a fax machine that was right by my bed, and so I hated when I would get those midnight faxes because quite often it was because somebody died. And
Right.
I had friends all over the country, from all over the people I had met, especially HIV positive women from all over the world. And so Um, and so I frequently had that experience of hearing that someone had died, and I didn't even, and I knew they had HIV, of course, but I didn't know they were sick. I had been in a meeting with them 2 weeks prior, and then suddenly they're dead. Um, I had that experience then, and have gone through a lot of PTSD, and so people in the LGBT community, especially, or healthcare providers that have a lot of experience with HIV and AIDS, you might be experiencing some PTSD as well. Recognize it, own it, um, and um, and so I think it started when our beloved Reverend Vicky Gibbs died from resurrection, and I and it was devastating because, well, I mean, because it's Vicky, right? But also because I didn't even know that she was positive. I didn't know she
Hmm.
and her wife were infected until we were about to start a new study group, and we get this message on Facebook saying, "Hey, we're both positive. I'm still like not back to 100%. We'll have to postpone the start. We'll start it next week." That was on a Tuesday, I believe. On Friday, she died,
Wow.
and it was just, it was traumatic for us, and kind of a weird. I'm one of these people who looks for silver linings, and so I just always do. And a silver lining is that her message has been spread far and wide. Her last sermon has been watched probably by millions of people. It's and she talked about how she died in July, and so she talked about how this pandemic is going to disproportionately affect BIPOC people more, and people of lower income, and the disenfranchised are just going to be affected even more. And anyway, and so um, and so then recently, within the last week, another beloved member of our community died rather suddenly. Um, was sick for 5 days, and um, then and then gone. And so, like you were saying, I mean, of course, during the AIDS epidemic, there was so much shame and stigma attached to it, and it's kind of confusing. And and we fought as AIDS activists. Part of um, our advocacy as treatment activist was for to remove that stigma, because if people are going to get treated for it, they have to come forward. They have to,
Now,
they have to be not afraid.
do you think that a lot of times there, even though there shouldn't be, that is sort of what goes on with COVID? I don't want anybody to know that I have COVID because they may not want to be
Yes.
around me later on.
Yes. Yes. And I have difficulty. I mean, even though it was wrong during the AIDS epidemic, it was somewhat understandable because, we are a prudish country. But with COVID, it's more difficult for me to fathom why there is that shame attached.
Hmm.
And I think it's because we're still asking. Quite often people asked of me, how did you get it?
Actually, and you know
And
what? Believe it or not, that is one of the questions and I think it's not that
yeah,
particular way of getting it, given it's COVID. It's
right.
like, well, can you give me pointers as to what you think may have
About,
you?
well, and yeah, and I think it is relevant in that sense. And I had a friend ask me in one of the meetings this week, um, and and he said, I hope this doesn't offend you, but I'm wanting, because he knows I'm careful.
Right.
I work in a medical setting. I probably caught it from a patient at work. Most of my counseling is done over the phone. So the things that have to be done in person, of course, patients there, and then we send them out to their car, and I talk to them over the phone. But on occasion, um, I have to
See them.
have, yeah, I have to see them in person. And so, I mean, getting back to Reverend Vicky, the last thing she said to me, and it was now looking back, it was so intuitive. The last thing she said to me is, "Be very, very careful, Verge. It only takes a few
A slip.
seconds, just one slip." And that was the last thing that she said to me, and it was on Facebook.
Right.
And 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 so, and I think that's how it happened. It was I just slipped. I had initially, with the first surge, I was double masking. I was wearing the N95s, and then another cloth
The
mask
surgical
over
over,
that,
yeah.
or I would wear the surgical and a cloth mask. And I kind of gradually loosened my own protocol a
Right.
little bit. I loosened it a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. And because most of the time I'm not having, as we learn more and more about it, and and the effect of mask, and which is best, and who has to wear it, and blah blah blah, and how much time it takes to actually transmit it,
Hmm.
unless somebody like just comes and coughs in your face. You have to spend some time with them, so that's why I think, anyway. So um and most of the time I'm just walking past patients,
Hmm.
quite often reminding them, put up your mask, pull up your mask, please put your mask back on, would you please put your mask back on. And I even lightened up on that because it was just so frustrating. I felt like I was dealing with a room full of teenagers.
Hmm.
You are grown women. You should not have, I shouldn't have to remind you like I'm your mom. And please
Right.
don't roll your eyes at me when I tell you to put on your mask.
Right.
And initially I was really, and when initially when somebody said, "Why do I have to wear the mask the whole time?" I said, "Because do you really want me to die in a hospital with tubes down my throat? Do you hate me that much?" I mean, I was really frank about it. And and then I lightened up on that. So I did let my guard down. I
So then it was
did
a, and it
loosen my personal protocols a bit. I mean,
so
I
but you see
wasn't
a
going
lot
out
of
and
people.
partying.
You see a
Yeah,
lot of people. So I mean, I imagine you,
right.
yeah.
So that's the thing, is that I do come in. I mean, for a while I was participating in a survey that I think it was maybe Rice University that was doing like a daily survey, and I just asked about exposure, and I finally stopped answering it because it was every single day, and literally every single. If I went to work, yes, I was exposed to more than 10 people.
Right.
You know,
Right.
and most of the time that exposure is very very minimal, but I think just loosening my personal protocol just a little bit,
Cause,
it
yeah.
is what did it. And I'm sure, and I'm yeah,
Now
I'm
let me
certain it
ask
was
you
at
this. Now
work.
let's, for the audience, tell them, how did you find out what how did your stuff gradually go from nothing to into something? How did you
I
start?
went, we test every 2 weeks at the clinic. And so I don't know if that's changing. It might be every day now, who knows. But they were testing every 2 weeks. So I had a a negative test result came back on Tuesday. So I was
Uh-huh.
tested on a Monday. Got my negative result on Tuesday. And then on Saturday evening, I felt a little run down. I went, I worked, and then met some friends who were helping with doing a recording for church, and then stopped at HEB to get my curbside order.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I got home, I was feeling under the weather. I was just like, I don't feel quite right. I'm tired. I didn't feel, even at work, I felt a little feverish or something. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
check my fever, check my temperature again. And I wasn't running a temperature. I was fine. And they were like, Verge, you're so paranoid. Because I am kind of paranoid. Like, I am
Right.
that person. I am that person that the minute I start feeling a little of anything, scratchy throat, allergies, anything, I got my pulse oximeter out. I'm checking that. I'm checking my fever, my temperature, and so that was part of it, is because my friend who asked that question said, "I know that you are super paranoid, and I'm very very cautious." And so anyway, so yeah, so I thought, well, it's probably just allergies. A storm had come through, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to get a good night's rest, had a little soup for dinner, went to bed early, woke up the next day, felt like crap. And I felt it was like I had a sinus infection that had
Hmm.
just hit suddenly, and I was pretty much in denial about it. Like, and the urgent care doctor was saying, "Well, did you have any symptoms beforehand?" And I was like, "No, not really." She's like, "What?" She said, "Well, sinus infections don't usually come on that quickly." And I said, "Well, but I did. I had some congestion earlier in the week. I did. Yeah, I had some. I was like trying. I was trying to convince myself and the urgent care doc that it was not COVID.
So when did they do the next test?
So they did the test that day. They tested me for flu and COVID, but and then my boss had me come in the next morning to go ahead and get a test because the doctor can expedite it. We would get
Right.
the results the next day from the test that they did at urgent care. I didn't get the results for another 4 days.
And did they
I
both
mean, which
match as
is
positive?
yes, yes.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the ah oops, sorry.
That's okay.
I think that was is I mean that's one of the delay in testing. This is where that's relevant. I mean, some people it's like all of these the kind of the minutia, the details of managing this pandemic, which our previous president did. I'm already calling him our previous president.
Yes, yes.
Um, anyway, but but the time lag between testing is relevant. I touched my friend. My friend was sick for 5 days. It was while the EMS was there trying to resuscitate him that his husband got the news that they were both positive.
Oh,
you know
wow.
and that's kind of and so if you wait until one of the lessons I learned is that and the urgent care doctor said kind of you have symptoms of COVID. I mean, and but it was also the classic symptoms of a sinus infection. I had pain and pressure, I had a screaming headache, I had congestion, I had overall malaise and just fatigue and just felt like crap. And so um, one word of advice would be um, to assume you have COVID.
Right,
If
right.
you're sick, assume it's COVID because it might take a few days to get your test results back.
Now, after
Now,
you found out that you had it, that means you probably by then would have had it about 4 or 5 days.
probably. And so I can't help but think of all of you know, I was thinking of like all the people
That you're
that
in
I
touch with.
had an encounter with, patients, even that was brief, patients, coworkers, the woman who came up to the window at HEB for the curbside, and like, hi, are you Verge? And thankfully, I know when that happened, I actually had, like, yeah, just kind of cracked the window a little bit. Yeah, yeah, I'm her, um, but I had left blueberries off of my order, so I ran in really quick um, to the produce section and grabbed some blueberries. And I was thinking, so I'm racking my brain and thinking, like, oh my god, how many people did I encounter? Of course, I had on a mask,
Right.
but still, and it's just and now we're hearing about this more virulent
Hmm.
aggressive virus that it does I hear that the symptoms are not any worse, but it's just very, very easily transmitted,
The
this
one that's
one that they're
hitting
seeing
England right now in the
in Europe.
UK.
And yeah,
Yeah.
yep, yep. And it's going to be, by tomorrow it's going to be in other countries. It is.
Right. But
And
so you're after there was one message that I saw where apparently you were doing fine at home, but you started to have breathing problems a few days into it. I think
I
that was like 8 days
it
or 10.
was it was about a week later that I what really frightened me, and because my pulse ox was had been it had been kind of like wavering at that point. It was like 92, 93, but it would always come back up to 94. it wasn't consistently under. I
Right.
decided to set 94 as my marker. The urgent care doc said 95. If I'd gone to the ER every time it went below 95%, it I would have been living at the ER, right?
Right.
And so I decided to set consistently under 94 as my marker. But what really motivated me to go was when I got up that morning, walked my dog. It was exhausting. It was like an 8-minute walk.
Mm-hmm.
We went down the stairs, across the courtyard, up the elevator. Done. And and it was exhausting. And I had been really committed to aggressive self-care.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally every 4 hours taking a mucinex, other medications, doing my breathing exercise, checking my pulse ox, etc. And I woke up that morning and I just didn't care anymore. And so that was the part that really scared the hell out of me, is that my determination was gone.
You just
I
didn't care.
was ready. I was ready to take a nap and let it take me. I stopped caring. Yes, I
Right.
stopped caring. And so it's like this virus is so insidious. It's as if it has an actual character and personality. You know, it's of course, any virus is a living creature, I mean, of sorts, an entity. But it's as if it was like something on a Star Trek virus that, that not only has the ability to attack all different parts of the body and all different people. I mean, I've had, so many friends who went through this. And like you said, a lot of times I didn't know until like they came out to me after I came out,
Mm-hmm.
and then they were like, well, yeah, I had
I
it
had
too.
it. Well,
I,
look,
you know, and,
Verge, I'm running
and,
out of time, so let me ask
oh
you to do me a
no.
big favor.
Okay.
Tell you had what I liked about one of the things that you said in your blog is that you're not a doctor, but this is what I
Mhm.
did, and it
Yeah.
seemed to
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
So
Oh
please
yeah.
tell the people what you did that seemed to work for
I
you.
do want to get that out. Thank you. But not a doctor. Okay. This was my experience. Um, I, I took Mucinex every 4 hours. So every 4 hours around the clock, I had alarms set. So every 4 hours, I took Mucinex. The logic is that the lungs fill up with fluids. That's a bad thing. So Mucinex DM. I was alternating ibuprofen and Tylenol to keep the inflammation and the fever and the body aches down. I So when I took the Mucinex, of course, I was drinking a big glass of liquids, a lot of Pedialyte and Gatorade. You want to get those electrolytes in. I was also checking my pulse ox, with my little oximeter,
Mm-hmm.
which, let me note, it's the readings are different for people of color
Mm-hmm.
because of the melanin.
Right.
So if you're a person of color, don't use the numbers that I use. You want to be really aware. If it drops below 95, you want to be really aware of your breathing. If you're having any breathing issues, get your butt to the ER, so they can take a blood sample and get
The
the
real, yeah.
absorption that way. Yeah. But and so every 4 hours, I was also doing breathing exercises, which involved deep breathing, trying to really fill every little inch of my lungs,
So they
holding
don't
it for
collapse,
10
yeah.
seconds, right? Holding it for 10 seconds, and then breathing out through a straw, my little trusty straw.
Right.
Because and a nurse had explained the logic of that, and I don't remember, but it's something about like filling up all of those little parts of and emptying them out of the lungs. Start taking vitamin D right now, D3. More and more studies are coming out that they're seeing that people with COVID are D deficient, and most of us are anyway. So a lot of the stuff that I did, it's not going to hurt. It's kind of so of course, if you have hemophilia, for example, you're not going to take my aspirin a day. Blood
Right.
clots are common with COVID, so I was taking a low dose aspirin. I started taking, well, I was already taking the D3 because of heart issues. And I took a good multivitamin. So if you're not taking any vitamins right now, start. Take a good solid multivitamin and vitamin D, D3. And I added, of course, extra orange, in the form of extra C in the form of orange juice, lots and lots of orange juice. A very powerful antioxidant called NAC, N-acetylcysteine, which was used early on in HIV care, self-care. So a lot of these things actually come from. I had this awesome friend in Northern California who is super nerd, and she was doing research and saying, okay, there's studies to back up this, there's studies to back up this. So everything I was doing, there is research to back it up. I mean, doctors are learning firsthand. So zinc, of course. So the minute you have any kind of symptoms, add extra zinc. So we're talking D, multivitamin C, zinc, NAC, a low dose aspirin. And one study has shown that people who were taking Pepsid, who knows why, had a better outcome. So I thought, what the heck? It fell into the it can't hurt category.
Right.
One of the things to be aware of is that, and of course, if somebody has hemophilia, you can't take the aspirin and ibuprofen. If you have blood pressure issues, in my case, I was also that every 4 hours I was waking up, taking my meds, checking my pulse ox, checking my temperature, doing my breathing exercises, drinking lots of fluids, get up, walk to the bathroom, walk around a little bit, and then go back to bed, and then the alarm would go off 4 hours later. I'd do it all again. But I was also using my albuterol inhaler because I do have asthma,
Mm-hmm.
and I was using that every 4 hours. And that combined with the ibuprofen was jacking up my heart rate. So that was when I went to the ER. The doctor, who actually, I felt stupid at one point because code blues were going off all around me. There was somebody had an active heart attack around the corner. They had to intubate several people in the ER. I thought, why am I here? I'm sorry, I'm wasting your time. And I don't remember if it was the doctor or the nurse who said, no, we'd rather see 10 of you than
Right.
that person
Because
we
what
have
you
to
do is you
intubate.
actually go in before you're into some
Uh,
sort of an arrest. But
Correct.
look,
Right.
Virginia, I have to go
Uh-huh.
now, but I want to ask you to give, tell us something in 30 seconds that I should have asked you that you want to get out there.
Um, I vaccine, the vaccine people, I can attest because I sat in the rooms with researchers. I was a treatment nerd. Um, Researchers have been working toward these kind of vaccines for decades, decades. I know it seems rushed, but it was, but yeah, it's not. They've been working on it for a long time. And one reason we were able to move as quickly on this is thanks to Chinese researchers who, before their government shut everything down, they got the word out. In part because of the AIDS epidemic, researchers share information a lot better. They have platforms. So they used to hang on to their data until they presented it. It was all about publishing and presenting. Now, so these these very heroic people shared that data
Yeah, they did release a
with the
genome.
with the world. And that's so then, because they've been working on the mRNA vaccines for decades, they're they were able just to plug in the the genome, and that's why we have these vaccines.
In other
And so
words,
I know it's new, I know it's scary, and I know some of you are going to wait until the rest of us get our vaccines. That's okay. I am happy to be your guinea pig. Um,
well,
but yeah, so that's and so much of what we know, even that basic thing about how researchers share data, came out of the AIDS epidemic.
excellent. Well,
Yeah.
Virginia Parks, thank you so kindly for spending this time with Politics Done Right. Your story is one that I think will be revealing to many. I think it's important that, like I said, that we all, share our tribulations, because in doing
Right.
so, we make it better for
Yeah.
us all.
Oh, one thing I didn't say
Yes.
is this my number one tip. Learn how to say yes, please, and thank you. Your friends want to help. So do not hide. Do not curl up in your bedroom. Talk to your friends when they offer help. Give them specifics. Say, yes, I only wanted to eat bananas for a while, for a few days, and friends brought me bananas. So, so say yes. Say yes. Not only do your friends want to help you, your friends need to help you.
Yes.
They'd rather help you now than grieve later.
Virginia, thank you so kindly for having been a part of Politics Done Right.
Right. Thank you.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel, and number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.